It takes a lot of money to build data centers. That's why investors have played an important role in the growth of the industry and the success of leading data center companies. Today on Data Center Richness, we look at the relationship between investors and data center operators and how they work together. Our guests are Sabey Data Center's president Tim Mirick and Jeff Kanne, the president and CEO of National Real Estate Advisors. The two companies have been working together since 2010, with National Real Estate providing the capital to enable Sabey to expand its footprint across the United States. I think it's a fascinating conversation that provides a glimpse into how these relationships work and how investment strategy and company culture translate into new capacity to support data center customers, and how those models adapt to the supersized development environment of 2025 and beyond. Let's get started. Welcome to Data Center Richness. I'm Rich Miller, and I've spent 25 years telling the story of data centers, cloud computing, and AI infrastructure. In this podcast, I'm sharing conversations with the innovators building our digital future. Now, here's our show. Jeff Kanne and Tim Mirick, welcome to Data Center Richness.
Hi, Rich. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Rich. Glad to be here.
This is an interesting opportunity to have the two of you here together because we can have a conversation about how capital partners and data center operators work with one another, which is something that we haven't discussed before on the podcast, and I think will be interesting for our audience to hear about. We usually start with just sort of setting a baseline, letting people get to know our guests a little bit. So we call it the data center journey. So why don't I start with Tim and then Jeff? But Tim, start by telling us a little bit about your career and about Sabey Data Centers.
Happy to. So it's Tim Mirick, and I'm the president of Sabey Data Centers. I've been with the organization going on 13 years now. My career primarily, since the beginning, has all been in the kind of the revenue side of the business, whether it's business development or sales organizations. Probably the biggest chunk of time prior to Sabey, I spent it at Amazon. And there I was lucky enough to work on and lead the third-party recruiting of services. So working and kind of recruiting the apparel store and all the different things that you now see on Amazon beyond books. Joined Sabey in 2012, really through a connection through a friend. So it wasn't a deliberate move that said, hey, I want to get involved in data centers. It was really all about the company. It was somebody that I'd worked with at Amazon before. And I said, hey, here's an organization that represents and stands for some really cool things, and you should come over and check them out. And the opportunity really resonated with me, and 13 years later, here I am. Inside the org, I worked in the sales org here. I was a CRO for about the last, about 5 years, and then I've been president for the last 2.
And for folks who don't know, maybe a little bit of background about Sabey.
So Sabey, really interesting background, at least I think so. Organization's been around since the early 70s. It was begun then really as a construction organization, and it got into data centers right around 2000. And so we've been building data centers really for as long as anybody in the industry. And if you really track it back, we built our first computer room that they called at the time, in I think in '78 for ADP. If you go all the way back on our timeline, so we've been working on kind of mission critical construction and operations, for a long time. We started building Sabey data centers in the early 2000s. Brought on our key partner in National in 2010, and then really began the expansion and became the company that we are today. Doing primarily wholesale co-location across the country. We like to think of ourselves really up to this point, right? It's been a focus on kind of large SaaS enterprise players, flexing up to unique hyperscale opportunities. And then, of course, with some of the changes and the requirements that you're seeing out there, you're seeing us, flex even more and drive towards some of the larger opportunities when they make sense. But that's been our focus over time.
And Jeff, maybe take a moment, tell us a little bit about yourself and about National Real Estate.
Sure. So I founded National Real Estate Advisors in the year 2000 after having founded a law firm. So I'm a lawyer by training. Done a million different things in my life, which I've enjoyed virtually all of them. Our firm manages about $10 billion in assets in really four different verticals: medical buildings, high-rise luxury apartments, a data center, and mixed-use developments. That's where our focus is. And in terms of data centers, we got into data centers when Tim was at Amazon. I was on the board of a regional mall REIT, actually a super regional mall REIT, that we had put together with a partner in the early 2000s. And I remember I was at a board meeting once right after Amazon did their book deal where they brought in all the books from England, Harry Potter books. That's what it was. It was a Hail Mary pass, I think we all learned later, for Amazon at the time, which provoked a discussion at the board meeting about what is this Amazon and the internet going to do to retail. I was really provoked by me because I had the glimmerings of this could be a real challenge to us to move forward quickly. We sold out of the mall business in about 2004, 2005, and I started looking for a data center investment. At the time, there weren't that many people looking for data center investments. It was right after the dot-com crash, so all things related to the internet were bad. But I was convinced that it was space that we had to be in. But I didn't understand when I set out on the quest how hard it was going to be to find a good operator who I had some faith in. It was kind of the Wild West at the time. Lots and lots and lots of little operators who might have one little data center in one small building somewhere. And many of them I didn't think really knew what they were doing. And I think I kissed every frog in the country over a period of about 4 or 5 years before I found the Sabey family and the Sabey business. And that's 2009. We negotiated a deal. In 2010, early, we closed it. And we've been partners ever since, 16 plus years now, I guess.
Yeah, and I remember those days, having worked in the dot-com bust, and it toured a lot of empty data centers that folks had built, on the build it and they will come premise, many of which wound up becoming the cornerstones of larger internet operations. So you kind of perceived the shift early there. One of the questions I'm kind of curious about is how you guys work together. National, obviously, you had an idea and a sort of, I guess, a profile of the kind of operators that you want to work with. Um, so when you guys come together, how do you sort of scope out, uh, how things work? And obviously, Tim wants to build some data centers. That's going to require some financing. What are how does the relationship work, and how does it grow and evolve?
Well, maybe I could answer that initially, um, because I think it's important to understand that our relationship is built on a shared culture. There are a lot of different ways to do any one thing, including building and developing and running data centers. Uh, so one of the reasons I had to kiss so many frogs before we found the Sabeys and they found us is that we couldn't find someone who shared our culture, our way of thinking about business, which really revolves around the belief that you have to be a truly a long-term investor. If your attitude is I'm just investing to get rich and get rich quick, and I'm going to move on to the next thing, well, that's not us. That's not the Sabey company at all. You have to believe in operational excellence, the willingness to make investments that don't pay off immediately, that you think will pay off in the long run. And you have to have a sense of total integrity or a belief in complete integrity. And we shared all of those attributes along with hard work and other things. And everything that we have flows from that. So we've always been organized as a partnership. We share our responsibilities. Dave Sabey is the chairman of the board. I'm the vice chairman of the board. We meet every month, not every quarter, like a lot of boards. I'm on the phone with people in the company, along with 4 or 5 of my colleagues constantly. So it's really a team approach to trying to figure out what's the best way forward, which, not always that easy. Over the last couple of years, it seems like, data center business is on fire. Everybody who's in it's going to get rich. And I think people forget what 2013 to 2020 rents declined every year. Things weren't so rosy. So, having people you have a common identity with in terms of cultural and business values makes it a lot easier to get through those kinds of tough times.
And Tim, how about from your side, on the side of the data center operator? Jeff gave us a pretty good overview from National. What's the view like from where you're sitting?
Sure. And so much of that I would say is, it is similar. And so much of what he said is really why I'm here, as he talked about the culture, et cetera, of the operating business. We work incredibly closely together. There's a lot of trust, of course, that allows our teams to operate every single day to the levels that our customers expect. But all the significant decisions, right? And I have a very supportive and active board that's involved a lot, right? Sometimes that can be frustrating, but in general, it's fantastic, right? I have some people with amazing backgrounds, certainly experience in capital raising, and have seen multiple cycles, which can offer a lot of really sagacious advice as we're looking at different opportunities. So it's our team's job to kind of keep pressing forward, finding those new opportunities, kind of press forward, and then find the opportunities that make sense, in partnership with the board. And we have transaction committees that meet regularly, that have both Sabey and National people on them, so we can look at everything from kind of medium-sized opportunities to kind of land opportunities. So we're really connected, at every level. And there's so much about that probably wouldn't work in most places, but it works really well, and largely because of, just as Jeff said, we share this culture and kind of a long-term belief. I think the only thing that he left out that I would say is we also share a belief in doing this in a way that's fun for everyone, which is fantastic, right? We really enjoy the people. I try not to tell Jeff this regularly, but I really, really like Jeff. I don't want him to, take that for granted. But all the people that we work with, we get along with. I consider them friends. It makes it a lot easier as you're working through some of these things and spending so much time. As we were working up to this call, Rich, right, we talked about with everything going on, what we may have cherished, 7 years ago as a great work-life balance has changed a bit, right? It's all in. And if you don't love it right now, it's probably not the space to be, but it is a fantastic spot, just because not only do you have all the challenges associated with trying to respond to the opportunity on the real estate and operations side, you also get kind of this front row view to maybe one of the most amazing revolutions in the technology space that's ever existed. And it's incumbent on us, for us to make good decisions. We have to understand as much of that as we possibly can. And my chairman and my vice chairman are probably the two most voracious readers that I've ever run into. Right, to try to keep up with that and be on top of it's tough, but it's absolutely the right bar. Because we want to make decisions. We want to take part in what's happening, but we certainly want to do it in a very fiscally prudent way, right? It's all about the stakeholders and the people that have trusted us with their capital. And I think we just have a wonderful balance of, kind of aggressive where it makes sense, but kind of balanced approach, consistently from the board.
So let's talk a little bit about that balanced approach and how that's been seen in how Sabey has developed its footprint. You guys were initially built an impressive footprint in the Pacific Northwest, in Seattle, and then in Quincy, I guess. For a while, then, after you had built that footprint, I know the company kind of looked at expansion and whether or not you wanted to go into new markets. This was a time when a lot of companies were trying to establish a national footprint and be sort of national data center companies. And Sabey very much kind of like took its time, I think. But I'm curious about how the process worked when you guys finally did decide that you wanted to move beyond the Pacific Northwest market and you had a couple of markets on the East Coast you were interested in. Maybe Tim, you could tell me how that started on Sabey's side, and then we could hear from Jeff about on the national side.
No, happy to, and because those guys were a big part of our East Coast expansion. Um, yeah, I think you said it kindly, right? We were very deliberate, perhaps, in the expansion, and probably could have done it sooner. I know we were really close on a bunch of different opportunities down in Santa Clara, and Hillsborough, and a lot of spots that have turned into really fantastic hubs. But we had a great concentration and a great business in the Pacific Northwest area. We're able to take advantage of the expansion and really be the largest player in Wenatchee and in Quincy, which has become one of the larger data center hubs, in the country. I would like to say it was part of some super strategic master strategy and plan, but I do think the first expansion east was a bit opportunistic, right? We had a fantastic asset that came in front of us, and that was when we began to work with National to put that together. At the time, I think we still really believe in this, right? The idea that proximity for certain applications, right? Proximity of a data center next to lots of people is very valuable. And so that asset with access to, 18 megawatts of power plus right in the heart of New York City, seemed like a fantastic bet. And it has turned out to be that, although Hurricane Sandy did not help us very much, happening like, a couple of years, right when we were about to turn the lights on. And then Ashburn came shortly after that. And, at that point, you didn't need to be a genius to know that Ashburn was going to be, what it has become today. But I think, John Sabey, who drove that, picked a fantastic piece of dirt. I wish he would have bought the 85 acres right next to it when we were there. But that has turned out, after a bit of a slow start, right, it's turned out to, really be a fantastic campus. I think we faced hurdles as we expanded. As you think about, we talked a lot about our culture already, and that's probably the biggest challenge for us because as we expand, it's one of the things I think that results in the great customer service. So we take it really seriously as we look at expanding and building the teams and locations, and it's not trivial to take that and take your culture from one location, to the next, right? The Sabey family's not there. I'm not there. The people that have been with us for 25 years are not in that building. And it takes a little while, but we've built fantastic teams in both those locations, and then ultimately, as you know, right now we've expanded in Texas, and there's other things happening, right? You can expect more expansion from Sabey, but that's how I would describe the East Coast expansion. Jeff, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So, so when we first got involved with Sabey, really had just the Seattle campus and one tenant in Wenatchee, a powered shell tenant. And I remember actually sitting with John Sabey at Quincy. We had a site plan on the hood of a pickup truck, and John was showing me how he thought we could develop a piece of ground in Quincy that we didn't own yet. And actually, that's when we made our very first investment. So, and our investment thesis, in addition to the cultural aspects that we talked about earlier, was I really believed that low cost renewable power was going to be an enormously profitable business to be in. At the time, we were paying 2.5 cents, and there weren't the same sort of counter arguments about global warming and sustainability that there is today. There was a fairly I think commonly held belief that hydro is good, climate change is bad. Let's do what we can. So I thought we could, in Central Washington on the Columbia River, be offering tenants just a great way to fulfill their mission of sustainable power and do it at the lowest possible cost. So that's one of the compelling reasons we got involved. Very quickly after we got involved, within a year and a half, um, an opportunity came up in Manhattan. And our firm, we do a lot of business in Manhattan in the Northeast. We know Manhattan very well. And Dave called me and said, "Hey, the Verizon building is going to be taken in a deed in lieu. Do you know it?" And I said, "Sure, I know that building." In fact, at the time, we were building the tallest for-rent building in Manhattan on the other side of the Brooklyn Bridge from where this was. So the building was going to go, we thought, for like $100 a foot. It was built by New York Telecom. Really, it's the tallest purpose-built data center building in the world. Most of it was empty at the time from now Verizon, then New York Telecom. So we $100 a foot for that property in Manhattan, where land was selling for $300 in FAR. We didn't think we could go wrong. More compelling was Google had just bought 111/8, and they announced that they were going to throw everybody out. As their leases came up, they weren't going to renew them. So I remember one particular conversation Dave and I had about maybe we need to design an auction to auction off the space in our new building once we got it ready to go. Well, that didn't work out. It didn't work out at all. I think there are a bunch of reasons for that. Most importantly, people were, I think, beginning to believe more than they are today, and it was actually part of the story we were selling potential tenants, is why do you need to have your data center in a high-cost area when you can go to Central Washington? 2.5-cent power. We have 90% free cooling days. So we had a lot of headwinds in the end, leasing up our property in Manhattan, that it's very expensive to build. Power is very expensive. And it took us a very long time. And actually, we reduced the size of the data center by half and converted the top of the building into office. But it was one of those experiences that it certainly forges a powerful partnership, because those were tough times. And of course, we had things going on all over the place, but we survived. We got through it, and now it's a profitable investment for us, and that's great. And we learned a lot.
The Ashburn end of that obviously has done very well. The demand for quality space in Ashburn has been consistent, and it seems like it will extend to the horizon. And the next phase after that was looking at Austin. I'm interested in hearing, Tim, maybe about, because Austin was one of those markets that's emerged that wasn't originally necessarily one of the major data center markets, but has evolved in an interesting way. Tell me a little bit about the Austin opportunity and what you saw there.
So again, we weren't looking necessarily in Austin per se. It came our way through us looking at a potential acquisition. And and it was very rare. I think it still is, right, rare to kind of find another organization that potentially could be a fit. So we were looking at this company, and through all the due diligence, that particular acquisition didn't work out. But through the due diligence, we really liked what we saw. As far as the data points surrounding Austin, kind of the direction it was going. Even Dallas in that moment really hadn't blossomed into the hyperscale market that it is today, right? It had been a really successful big enterprise and SaaS market, but not so much the hyperscalers. And that's obviously changing. And I don't know, frankly, from Dallas all the way to San Antonio, it seems like one big data center corridor these days. But when we were looking, I think, Austin at the time was a retail and kind of smaller enterprise focus. There'd just been a couple of multi-megawatt deals done in the space, but we believe directionally it was going in the right direction. We liked the composition of the location and how it fit for our client base. And so we made the move. Once the acquisition didn't work out, frankly, we'd prefer to do greenfield anyways. And so we found some dirt and Round Rock and moved forward. Hired some fantastic people to help lead that group down there, and it's been great. I'd only like to be able to build it faster, which I'm sure is something that every data center person out there is saying these days, to try to accommodate the interest in the space. But it's a fantastic area. One of the things I thought was interesting, because when we were writing up the business cases for, frankly, both Ashburn and Austin, is that we thought that we would be able to kind of take existing customers to those locations, or find, and what's happened has kind of been the opposite, is we're finding new customers, and then those new customers then kind of expand their portfolio to other locations, like coming to the low-cost power, as Jeff described, in Central Washington. So, one of the great benefits that I've got is our operations teams take such great care of the customers, is they're looking for ways to expand. And sometimes I can accommodate it, sometimes I can't. But when I can, there's a lot of interest from the existing customers to expand inside the portfolio. And frankly, I owe that all to the individual operations people that are, out on the floor doing that every single day. But Austin's been great for us. That entire community has really been good for us in the data center space.
So, Jeff, I wanted to ask about sort of the current market environment, and how you think about that sort of from an investment perspective. Obviously, since 2022, when we've had the generative AI explosion, there's been a lot of capacity being built. Meanwhile, or being requested, there's a very much a boom in discussion and demand around data centers. At the same time, cloud continues to grow pretty strongly. I think that's a story that doesn't get as much attention necessarily. But there's been a lot of investor interest in the sector, a lot of announcements of capital going to data center development. At the same time, the geography and the kinds of data centers that are being built have, it seems like it's in flux as well. Tell me your thoughts on the current market, and how you think about what the opportunities are for someone like yourself, who has some capital and understands the data center business.
Well, I would say, first of all, 16, 17 years ago, when I first started to try to invest in data centers, almost everybody in my world thought I was insane. They thought I was crazy. Didn't know what I was doing. What are those things? Why would you invest in those things? And actually, it was a long uphill battle for me to convince the people I needed to convince in order to make investments in data centers. As recent as 2 years ago, I was with a consultant whose client, many of our investors have consultants who we have to speak to. One asked me for breakfast because his client had asked him, I'm interested in investing in National's fund. You need to do some homework. And I went to breakfast with this fellow, and he didn't know what a data center was. He's an investment professional. He's on a computer every day. He has a telephone. Doesn't know what a data center was. That's like 2 years ago. Now everybody wants to throw money into data centers, and I would bet this guy does too. And I would also bet that he still doesn't understand what a data center is. So that's a long way of getting to the point of 4 or 5 years ago, there weren't a lot of people who understood what a data center does, how it operates, why it's important, what the economics were, and where it's going to go. And I think that's still true. But investors are like sheep, and they just follow the crowd, particularly people who advise investors, because they know they can't get in trouble as long as they're saying the same thing everybody else is saying. And as long as everybody goes down with the ship, then they didn't make a mistake getting on the ship. So there are a lot of people who are just following the crowd here. Now, what does that mean? That means I think there's a lot of money coming into the market that doesn't know what they're doing. Does that mean they're going to lose money? No, I don't know. I think we are at a juncture right now in the business and in the technology world that there's so much going on. It's so complicated. There are so many natural constraints as well as so much capital coming in that nobody knows where this is going to go in the short term and in the medium term in terms of how much is going to get built, who's going to make money, who's going to lose money. We know that eventually, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, this is going to be a huge industry that's going to be stable and going to have tremendous long-term value. Between now and then, though, we could see some real ups and downs. We could see people that go broke. We could see a lot of things, and things they're changing, right? Like we just got a service letter, and Tim, you tell me if I won't give details. If you can give details, you give details. But we just got a service letter for 250 megawatts from a utility in a place that we would like to build a campus. And 2 days later, an entity that owns two separate data center investments is buying the utility. So I think to myself, oh my God, now our competitors are actually buying the utilities themselves. And what does that tell me? It tells me if they're buying the utility because they're trying to get power for their data center businesses, which is what I think they're doing, that's a whole new universe of complications to try to sort through. So I know that data center is going to have tremendous long-term value, but we don't want to get out over our skis in a time that could be very volatile. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and so let me turn to Tim, because you mentioned that Sabey's followed sort of a prudent path. At the same time, many people see lots of opportunity. How do you sort of like, obviously you've been doing this for a long time, but what's the process for sorting out, what's real, what's a real opportunity, and how you chart the best path forward for your business and the way you guys look at the world?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, and I'm not sure there's a perfect answer. I'm fortunate, I'm surrounded by folks like I described before, right, that have seen a few of these cycles, right? And so I get a lot of different viewpoints to help along the way. I think, we have always taken, really, detailed and judicious kind of look at our leases and our expansion since the beginning. So that DNA is in us as we look at this. It is, I read about expansions every single day, and sometimes do I get jealous about these massive expansions and purchases? Sure. And the industry has certainly changed with the massive onslaught of new private equity coming into it, right? As we think of ourselves, right, as one of the only, kind of truly private, privately held data centers out there, kind of closely held, because the size of some of these others with the private equity available to them is just very different, and it changes the way potentially you look at things, right? I mean, I work every day with the Sabeys. I know Jeff. I know each one of our investors, our key investors, by name. So every decision we make is a very, personal and thoughtful choice. So while our responsibility, of course, is to grow value for the stakeholders, we've got a very valuable, business as it is, and we want to make the right decisions. Now, we are also bullish about kind of the direction the companies or the business in general is going, and we are going to take steps to build bigger and build faster and take advantage. We've spent a lot of time developing a much more capable debt capacity and access to different capital, right, to be able to do some of these things. But it is not going to change kind of the thoughtful approach to how we go after it. And so we've looked at percentages of the business. We've been a 70+%, investment grade, company for a long time. It's a big part of who we are. It's a big part of why people invest with us. So as we look at some of the newer industries, right, folks that need to get there, we take that really seriously as to how much of any of that portion of business do we want to take on. I think it may be inevitable, right? Kind of going the direction we go, that we may end up really liking a company and believing in their business well enough to want to do a deal, which, given kind of our size, may change that percentage for a period of time. But we would only make that choice if over time we kind of believe that we will have that they will either attain investment grade status or will be balanced by other investment grade companies, right? To kind of maintain where we like to be, from a risk perspective in general. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, specifically, but what I would tell you is we're thinking about it every single day as deals come our way and as properties, come our way, and we think about how it fits in, right? Whether it's a kind of a much bigger kind of LLM, focus type opportunity, and or maybe inference or, incremental to our enterprise slash, kind of strategic hyperscale business. We think about it every day, and like I said, you'll see expansion from us, coming. Will you see a 1,000-acre location where we're building on spec? Probably not. I think you already got a sense of what I would get at the board if I brought that to Jeff with his last response. So that's probably not coming. But there's going to be some really cool stuff that we're going to do with people.
Well, let me ask about you got into sort of the customer mix, and creditworthiness and that sort of thing. Obviously, the hyperscalers have who are well-known large companies, credit tenants, have been a big part of the drive forward thus far. Now we see sort of a second tier of companies with a much shorter histories, but they have large appetites. And meanwhile, as you noted, enterprise IT continues to need data center space. I don't know that there are as many people who are, building with them as the first priority in mind these days. But as you think about your model, and as you mentioned, you guys build wholesale. Do you like is it mostly single tenant kind of offerings nowadays? Do you like having, a multi-tenant, in the wholesale approach? How are you thinking about the landscape in terms of what you build and how many folks you have in a building?
Sure. I mean, to answer the one question, yes, I like it. We love our multi-tenancy, right? And the fact that we have hundreds of customers. We like that. We like the diversification of risk across the portfolio. Our investors like it. But I think it almost, at this point, is coming down to almost campus by campus and what that looks like, right? So we have our legacy campuses and those assets, and those kind of have a particular profile. And will probably likely continue that way, right? As you see, renewal rates and that are, very, very high. Our churn rate, sub 2% across the entire, portfolio. But as we look at new campuses, they really have a personality as you're looking at them, kind of based on location, based on, how fast you're trying to ramp, et cetera. I saw a diagram the other day that showed kind of the direction and the focus of a bunch of different data center companies, right? Starting with kind of retail on the far right, and the big hyperscale slash emerging hyperscalers on the far left. And there was a few little companies in the middle, and we were considered to kind of be in the middle, right? This ability to do. We have a very small amount of retail left on certain locations, but we've done kind of large SaaS stuff, very specific hyperscale stuff, and are looking at larger opportunities with both hyperscale, et cetera. But I just keep seeing that middle is just there. It'll likely be just blank, fairly soon, because one of the biggest challenges is if you are able to secure power in a desirable location, likely the demand, because as you expressed before, right? I mean, I think, if you look at, numbers that are out there, I mean, I could probably give you any number and find a report to back it up, but I think it's like 28%, compound growth looking at the emerging hyperscalers, and 23 on the base cloud business, which is on such a massive base, it's almost mind-boggling. They're the ones that can consume that. So it's getting very hard in certain cases, right, for the traditional business of a 1 or 2 megawatt, enterprise tenant to come into a campus and then kind of slowly expand. There's fewer options for them all the time. So I like to have that portion of our business, and we will continue to support that and try to grow that in the right places in the portfolio. And then I think you'll see us, in certain new locations that we go into, be much more focused perhaps on the hyperscalers and potentially on the emerging hyperscalers as we look at those opportunities.
I always like to kind of close with a look at the road ahead. You guys have been studying the market for a long time. Uh, Jeff, you mentioned that it's like the Wild West in some ways, but it's also, there is lots of opportunity out there. What do things look like, and how does that guide how you think about the opportunity and work with Tim and his team on executing on it?
Well, I think one thing that really distinguishes us from other data center operators is the care that we can give our tenants. We're big enough to be able to do 250 megawatt campus if we want to at one time. We're small enough that we can deal with our enterprise tenants, and they love us, and they keep coming back and they keep expanding. When we first started Ashburn, we designed 3 buildings in our first campus, 7.8 megawatts for the whole building, divided into 4 quads of 1.8 megawatt, and it was slow going. Now our third and last building, same footprint, 3 stories, it's going to be 77 megawatts. And it's really the same footprint. Our engineering, our chief technology officer has done a fantastic job squeezing that in. But that's all enterprise tenants. And they love us, and they expand with us, and they go to other places with us. I personally love that business. If we get into the Neocloud business, and I suspect we're going to get into the Neocloud business, I think it's going to be more of a partnership than a landlord-tenant relationship. And I don't mean that in a financial sense. It's going to be somebody who we believe in their business plan, believe in their culture, and who believes in us. That's the company that's going to get us across the line to take a risk with them. And we have some relationships now on a smaller level, but 5 or 10 megawatts is a heck of a lot different than 150 megawatts. So where do I see? I'll tell you, where do I see the industry in 5 years? I don't really know what's going to happen to other companies. I don't know what their financials well enough to know if they are taking risks they shouldn't take. I think some of the Neoclouds are going to fall out, and I think they're going to hurt some of the data center operators. I also think we're going to constantly see new Neoclouds, new cloud providers. One of the things the big build is going to do in the end is leave an opening. When there is a downturn, there's going to be space, and there's going to be space for new operators, new smaller cloud providers to show up to provide services to people who want to design their own AI applications and other applications. So I think that's a good thing in the long run. From our perspective at Sabey, I think we are going to be probably twice as big. We'll probably set up a new campus every year. We'll do it financially prudently. We'll get good tenants, a mix of enterprise, current hyperscalers, and new Neoclouds, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, day after day after day. And we'll have a fantastic company in 5 years.
Tim, over to you. It sounds like Jeff's talking about the possibility for some growth. It sounds like that will keep you busy. How do you see the landscape before you, and how do you go and work your plan?
Sure. Well, I wouldn't want it any other way. And I got lots of thoughts, as Jeff does, right, on kind of directionally where the industry's going, and kind of federating access to AI and access to cloud, right, and how that'll support multiple players versus perhaps just 3 or 4 giant ones, which will create great opportunities, I think, for providers. But where I try to break it down to and focus is it's all about the customers. And if we do a great job in listening to them and responding to their needs and building what they need and delighting them essentially every day with our service, we will have a great future, right? We'll be able to build the right products that cater to their needs, that allow them to expand with us and allow us to grow, and they'll stay with us over the long term, which obviously is the critical piece of all of this. So to steal something from Amazon, right? If it all starts with the customer and you work backwards from there, you can't really go wrong.
Well, listen, I have enjoyed this conversation. This has been fun and interesting to sort of get the two sides of the story here and how Sabey's gone about expanding. So, Jeff, Tim, I thank both of you for being here.
It was a pleasure to be here, Rich. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rich.
Many thanks for listening. If you like our content, you'll want to check out the Data Center Richness Substack. We're just now launching and have lots of great insights in the pipeline. If you're a data center professional or someone tracking the sector for your business, you will definitely want to check it out. I'm going to put a link in the show notes for the podcast and also in the description for the video on YouTube. And as always, if you've enjoyed the podcast, please give it a like. And be sure to subscribe to our channel, as this supports my work and ensures that you won't miss out on any of our insights from Data Center Richness.